Hey, what's going on, people? It's SGZ here from the SpartanGameZone, and in this video I'm going to be going over all the changes that were pushed through from the latest Borderlands 3 hotfix. Now this hotfix is big. It did a lot of balancing changing to the weapons, and a lot of your favorite guns got nerfed. And they did buff a few others, quite a lot of other ones too actually. But if you ask me, it's a little bit late to be doing this, especially in this amount, considering that a lot of people have spent a lot of time farming for these guns, and now, hey, they're not so good anymore. And on the other hand, if you sold some guns, they're actually good now, so you have to go back and get them. So it's a little bit late. I mean, it's 5 weeks after. I mean, split screen is still a mess, and you still lose items in your bank and stuff like that. So it's a bit of an interesting one, especially at this much changes. But either way, we'll have a look and see why they did it. So here we go. They say, our goal with legendary gear is to enable a large variety of playstyles and builds for all characters. After looking through the data, we found out that some pieces of legendary gear were greatly outperforming others, and felt they were limiting builds instead of increasing them. In addition, some of the damage output of legendary gear limited the growth in combat engagements for the future, so we tuned everything to an acceptable median. We expect all Vault Hunters to be able to create amazing builds, and we want to support that with more ways to grow and reach those power levels. So it seems like they're bringing some of these top tier overpowered guns down so that we have more to focus on, I guess, which I get that, but sometimes when you, like, I know some of you out there have spent a lot of time trying to get the best guns with the best anointed stuff, and now, you know, they're almost useless, so that kind of sucks. But either way, let's go ahead and have a look at these weapons. So here we go, we got a few changes to some melee 1 weapons. The Western Gun got its damage increased by 25%, ASMD by 28%, and the Cutsman, which I just got recently, actually got its damage reduced by 25%, so I'll never know how good that gun was. But anyway, TDR 10 Gallon got damage increased by 8%, which is very small, and wondering if that makes a difference. Flat off the Sickle, reload speed increased by 25%. The Phasor damage increased by 15%. Infinity damage increased by 40%, and it definitely did need that, otherwise it was just basically the only thing good about it was that you didn't have to reload. Magnificent damage increased by 25%, definitely needed that. Jericho damage increased by 40%, and actually reduced accuracy and handling by for the Lucian's Call. And the Lyuda critical damage bonus decreased by 30%, and they made a modification to address a reported bug that an extra bullet was spawned in the center. Now that's a pretty big change for the Lyuda actually, considering it is basically the best gun in the game, and I guess maybe they did need to nerf it, but that's a really big nerf, especially when you talk about what they say here. The Lyuda's functionality is to split the projectile from 1 to 3 after a certain distance. It's reported that the original projectile was never destroyed in the process of splitting, so one projectile actually became 4. Addressing this concern effectively removed a full shot's worth of damage, which auto-corrects the base damage of the weapon. Now they could have just done that, but they actually reduced the critical damage by 30% as well. And the reason for that is because they increased all sniper rifle critical damage bonuses in a previous hotfix, and by reducing it, it kind of balances them out. Now, I never actually used the Lyuda, I never had one before the patch. I mean, I tried it on Greyboard before and it's still good, but it's not god tier or anything like it was before, as I've seen from some gameplay I've watched, which is unfortunate. Torg, Tri-Bolt damage increased by 25%, Alchemist, same thing. Devil's Force got its damage increased by 13%. I thought that gun was pretty good, 13%. Hey, we'll take it. But here's a big one, the Flakker now consumes the full magazine when fired, and damage is reduced by 33%. I mean, that's a really big nerf on the Flakker. The Flakker was basically, you had to have it in your build. It was a fantastic weapon. And it's really interesting with what they say here. It's as though they didn't even test the gun in the first place. Flakker was greatly outperforming other shotguns due to the number of projectiles and the high rate of fire. We initially believed the resulting projectile spread would cause most of the explosions to miss the target. However, this turned out to be false. I don't know why they would believe that. They should know if they've tested it at all, but anyway, so we reduced the projectile damage and allowed the weapon to only fire once per magazine. This change encourages players to capitalize on different stat bonuses to maximize the weapon's damage output. Now, you might be a little bit confused, especially with it consuming the full magazine. And right now, the Flakker, rather than having 16 in the mag, it has 1, and it consumes your 4 bullets. So it's just got the 1 in the mag, and it just consumes 4 bullets. So magazine size, any buffs or action skills that increase your magazine size don't do anything. It's always got 1, and it always consumes the 4 bullets, if that makes sense at all. But either way, the Flakker really did get a big nerf. I mean, the firing speed is really low now, and the damage as well, reduced by 33%. That's a whole third. So the Flakker, I mean, it's still good, but it's a shell of its former self. Laser Exploder, rocket projectile, spawn interval increased by 0.4 seconds. Jacobs, the Maggie got a damage increase by 35%, which is actually really good if you're using any Jacobs builds like Flak, where you're focusing on critical hit damage. I mean, that's a really good one for you. Hal Walker, damage reduced by 8%. Okay, now onto Hyperion. We found that a couple of the legendary Hyperion weaponry bypass the Hyperion manufacturer playstyle too easily, making their bonuses greatly outweigh the penalties. The Butcher was drastically outperforming all metrics, and we chose to reduce the damage in order to keep the fast fire rate. Okay. Conference Call, damage increased by 15%. I think maybe you could have doubled that, possibly. I used it before and it's still not fantastic. And the Crossroad, accuracy reduced, and it now fires 3 projectiles instead of 4. Now, I actually had a video coming up on the Crossroad. I may still release it, and that was when it had 4 projectiles, and it was actually very good then. But now it's only got 3, so what's that? A 25% effectively damage reduction for that. The Butcher, accuracy reduced and damage reduced by 25%, which is quite a decent chunk there. Dial, Vanquisher, damage increased by 20%. Children of the Vault, now they actually spell a couple of these wrong, which is a little bit funny. The Skixel, damage increased by 15%. The Lineage, damage increased by 20%, which, I mean, these guns were solid, so I mean, that makes them even better. And Painter's Power, damage increased by 25%. Atlas, Ruby's Wrath, damage increased by 10%. Now moving on to the grenades, and this is actually a really big change to actually the whole playstyle of these grenades. Hex and Firestorm were calibrated to the wrong grenade modifier. These 2 grenades were envisioned to specialize by applying elemental damage over times to targets. Instead, they were resulting in large amounts of damage, and the elemental damage over times were minimal. We realized this is a drastic change on both of these grenades, it sure is, but we did not want to remove the spectacle of the grenade, number of grenades spawned, numbers of targets hit, etc., and focused on allowing their core identity to be emphasized instead of them continuing to just be high damage grenades. So, I mean, I personally don't have these grenades, but I hear that this is a massive change to these grenades and how they perform. I mean, you're basically changing the whole fundamental that makes them good in the first place. So, I mean, that's a big hit to the stomach, I think, for a lot of people, that one. Hunter Seeker, damage increased by 25%. Hex Grenade, damage reduced by 70%. And duration reduced to 3 seconds. So, there we go. That's massive. Firestorm, damage reduced by 70%. So, I mean, what are they now, you know? Artifacts. It was reported that the legendary artifact, Elemental Projector, had a bug, resulting in the max value being displayed at 183% instead of the actual max value of 113%. Therefore, we addressed the discrepancy and reduced the max value to 90%. Now, I don't know if that makes sense to you, but should they reduce it to 113 instead of 90? I think I had this one, and it was 183, but now it is 90, which is the same as a lot of the purple ones that you can get, but I suppose it does have some extra benefits as well. Now they also made changes to the Vault Hunters. Now basically I'll skim over this, but basically they just increased Iron Bear's health by 50, all of Flak's pets by 50, and the Digiclone for Zane by 100%. Now this is just in the meantime while they work on other ways to make them more viable rather than just increasing their health, which I think health's just an interim solution to that problem. Okay, and there were also a lot of bug fixes here. No big ones, except for I would say that this one's the biggest one. Shield boosters were modified and now set for auto pickup, which is actually fantastic because it's kind of really hard when you're shooting at someone and focusing on shooting people to pick up, your shield boosters, so that's a good thing. So overall, I hope you guys enjoyed this video. I hope it sheds light on what this hotfix does. Let me know in the comments what you think. I'm interested to know what you guys think of everything. As this video helped you out, consider dropping a like or subscribing, and I'll catch you in the next one.